My name is Skylar and I am 28 years old. This Christmas morning destroyed everything I believed about family loyalty. Standing in my childhood kitchen staring at my mother's satisfied smirk, I discovered the unthinkable truth: my parents had sold my Tesla without permission and used the money for my brother's wedding. But that betrayal was nothing compared to what I found hidden in my father's desk drawer later that day. Some family secrets run so deep they reshape your entire existence, and mine was about to explode in ways that would leave my family in ruins forever. Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from today. If you have ever dealt with family betrayal or financial manipulation, you know this story is about to get intense. Make sure to hit that like button if you are ready for some serious Christmas karma, and do not forget to subscribe because trust me, you will want to see how this revenge story unfolds. This family learned the hard way that messing with the wrong person has consequences they never saw coming. Christmas morning started like any other year at the Henderson family home in suburban Denver. The familiar smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and my younger brother Marcus bounced around the living room like he was still 12 instead of 25. I had driven down from my apartment in Boulder the night before, exhausted from my job as a software engineer but excited to spend the holidays with family. That excitement died the moment I asked about my car keys. "Oh, honey, we need to talk about your Tesla," Mom said casually, not even looking up from her coffee. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her Christmas morning robe, that sickeningly sweet smile plastered across her face that I had learned to fear growing up. "What about it?" I asked, already sensing something was wrong. I had left my Model S in their garage 3 months ago when I flew to Seattle for a work conference, planning to pick it up when I got back. Work had been so crazy that I had been using ride shares and my backup Honda Civic, but I had always intended to retrieve my Tesla. Dad cleared his throat from his recliner, suddenly very interested in his newspaper. "Well, sweetheart, Marcus needed money for the wedding and we knew you were not using the car." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You sold my car, now do not get dramatic," Mom continued, waving her hand dismissively. "It has been sitting there for months. We figured you had moved on to other things. Marcus and Jennifer need every penny for their dream wedding at the Broadmoor Resort. Family helps family, Skylar." I stared at them in complete disbelief. "That car cost me $65,000. I bought it with my own money. You had no right to sell it." Marcus finally spoke up from the couch, not even having the decency to look embarrassed. "Come on, Sky. You have been doing fine without it. Besides, Jennifer's family is already judging us for not being able to afford the fancy venues they want. This wedding is important for my career advancement too." "Your career advancement?" I laughed bitterly. "You work part-time at a sporting goods store, Marcus. And how exactly is my stolen car money going to advance that?" "Do not be so selfish," Dad interjected, finally putting down his paper. "Your brother is starting his life with a wonderful woman. You are already established, you have a good job, you can buy another car. This is what families do for each other." The gaslighting was immediate and brutal. Suddenly I was the selfish one for being upset that my parents had committed what was essentially theft. They had forged my signature on the title transfer, accessed my registration documents from my old room, and sold my car to a dealer while I was working 70-hour weeks in Seattle. "How much did you get for it?" I asked through gritted teeth. Mom and Dad exchanged a look. $42,000, Dad admitted quietly. $42,000. That car was worth at least $55,000 in the current market. "Well, we needed to sell it quickly," Mom said defensively. "The wedding is in 6 weeks, and the final payment was due to the venue." I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. My parents had stolen my car, sold it below market value, and were now acting like I was the unreasonable one for being upset about it. The money represented 2 years of saving countless overtime hours, and the first major purchase I had ever been truly proud of. "I want the money back. All of it. Including the difference between what you got and what it was actually worth." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "Sky, we have already put deposits down on everything. The venue, the flowers, the photographer. Jennifer's dress alone cost $3,000. We cannot just cancel everything now." "That is not my problem, Marcus. You should have asked before stealing my property." "We did not steal anything," Mom snapped, her fake sweetness finally cracking. "We are your parents. We provided for you for 18 years. The least you can do is help your brother when he needs it." The emotional manipulation was suffocating. They were using my love for them against me, twisting family loyalty into justification for theft. I realized this was not the first time they had prioritized Marcus over me, but it was definitely the most financially devastating. "I am calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. Dad shot to his feet. "You will do no such thing. This is a family matter. We will work something out, but you are not involving law enforcement in our personal business. You made it law enforcement business when you forged legal documents." The room fell silent except for the Christmas music playing softly in the background. The irony of silent night filling the air while my family imploded was not lost on me. Mom started crying, then the crocodile tears she had always used to manipulate situations in her favor. "I cannot believe you would threaten your own parents with jail time over a car. We raised you better than this, Skylar." But I was done being manipulated. "You raised me to believe that family means something, that trust means something. You just taught me that was all a lie." I stormed upstairs to my old bedroom, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. This was not just about the money, though. Losing $65,000 was devastating on my engineer salary. This was about the casual way they had violated my trust, the assumption that my possessions were somehow communal property, and the complete lack of remorse or accountability. As I sat on my old twin bed staring at the posters I had hung in high school, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to let this go. I was not going to be the family doormat anymore. But first I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Something about their behavior felt too confident, too casual. They had done this like they had practice, like they knew they could get away with it. That was when I decided to do some digging of my own. The rage gave way to something much more dangerous, cold, calculating fury. I spent the rest of Christmas Day in my childhood bedroom, my laptop open, systematically researching my legal options while my family celebrated downstairs like nothing had happened. The sounds of their laughter felt like nails on a chalkboard. My first call was to my insurance company. The Tesla had been under my policy and I needed to understand my coverage options for theft. The representative was sympathetic but clear. Since the thieves were family members with access to the vehicle and registration documents, this fell into a legal gray area that insurance would not cover until after criminal charges were filed. Next, I called a lawyer friend from college, Sarah Chen, who specialized in family law. She listened to my story with growing anger on my behalf. "Skylar, what they did is absolutely theft, regardless of family relationship," Sarah said. "Forging your signature on a title transfer is fraud. You have grounds for both criminal and civil action." "But they are my parents," I said weakly, the conditioning of 28 years still fighting against my rational mind. "That makes it worse, not better. They exploited their relationship with you to commit a crime. The fact that they had access to your documents because you trusted them as family does not give them the right to use those documents." Sarah walked me through the process: file a police report for theft and fraud, pursue civil action for the full value of the car plus damages, and document everything. She also suggested something that had not occurred to me, investigating whether this was part of a pattern. "People who commit fraud this casually usually have practice," she said. "You might want to check if they have access to any other accounts or assets of yours." That suggestion sent ice through my veins. I immediately logged into my bank accounts, credit reports, and any other financial accounts I could think of. Everything looked normal at first glance, but Sarah's words echoed in my mind. I decided to dig deeper. I started with my credit report, examining every line item going back several years. Most of it was expected: my mortgage, student loans, credit cards, the Tesla loan that I had paid off early. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a credit inquiry from 18 months ago that I did not recognize. A mortgage inquiry from First National Bank of Colorado dated during a period when I had definitely not been shopping for a new home. I had been living in the same apartment for 3 years and had not even been thinking about buying. My hands shook as I called the bank's customer service line. After being transferred through multiple departments and providing extensive identity verification, I finally reached someone who could help. "Yes, Miss Henderson, I show here that there was indeed a mortgage application submitted using your information in August of last year," the representative said. "However, the application was withdrawn before processing was completed." "Withdrawn by whom?" "The application shows it was withdrawn by, let me see, Marcus Henderson, who was listed as your power of attorney for the transaction." The room spun around me. I had never given Marcus power of attorney for anything, let alone a mortgage application. This meant my parents and brother had attempted to use my credit and financial information to secure a mortgage, presumably for themselves, and had only backed out when something went wrong in the process. I spent the next hour on the phone with various financial institutions, and the picture that emerged was stomach-turning. Over the past 2 years, there had been multiple soft credit inquiries using my social security number, several attempts to open credit cards in my name that were declined due to income verification issues, and even an attempt to take out a personal loan using my employment information. My family had not just stolen my car. They had been systematically attempting to exploit my financial identity for years. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. Every family dinner, every holiday, every "how is work going, honey" conversation had been them gathering intelligence to use against me. They had been treating me like a resource to be mined rather than a daughter and sister to be loved. I called Sarah back immediately. "This changes everything," she said when I filled her in. "This is not just theft anymore. This is identity fraud, attempted mortgage fraud, and conspiracy. We are talking about federal crimes now. What do I do? Document everything. Screenshot all of these credit reports and inquiries. Get written statements from the banks. And then we bury them legally. No more family considerations, Skylar. They made their choice when they decided to treat you like a victim instead of family." But even as I gathered evidence, part of me wanted to give them one more chance. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Marcus had made a mistake with that mortgage application. Maybe they would make this right if I just confronted them with what I had found. So I went downstairs with printouts of everything. The family was in the living room. Marcus and his fiancée, Jennifer, cuddled on the couch while Mom and Dad cleaned up wrapping paper. The scene of domestic bliss made me sick. "We need to talk," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Oh good, you have come to your senses about the car," Mom said brightly. "I knew you would realize that family comes first." I spread the bank documents across the coffee table like playing cards. Would someone like to explain why Marcus tried to take out a mortgage using my credit information last year? The color drained from every face in the room. Jennifer looked confused, but everyone else looked like deer caught in headlights. "I do not know what you are talking about," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really, because I have documentation of credit inquiries, loan applications, and attempted credit card openings, all using my personal information, all unauthorized?" Marcus tried to bluster. "Sky, you are blowing this out of proportion." "Am I? Because the FBI treat is identity fraud very seriously. So does the IRS. And so do mortgage lenders when they discover fraud attempts." Mom started crying again, but this time they looked like real tears. "Skylar, we can explain." "No," I said, gathering up my documents. "Explanation time is over. I trusted you with my life, and you have been systematically stealing from me for years. The car was just the latest theft." I headed toward the stairs, then turned back one more time. "You have 48 hours to figure out how you are going to make this right. All of it. The car money, damages for the fraudulent applications, and compensation for the credit monitoring I now have to do for the rest of my life. If I do not have a plan and a timeline by December 27th, I am filing criminal charges." The silence that followed me up the stairs was deafening. By December 26th, my phone was ringing non-stop. First Mom, then Dad, then Marcus, all trying different manipulation tactics. Mom went with guilt and tears, Dad tried the authority approach, and Marcus oscillated between anger and bargaining. I let every call go to voicemail and listened to each one with growing disgust. "Skylar, honey, please call me back," Mom sobbed into the phone. "We can work this out as a family. You are going to destroy us over money. Is that really what you want?" Dad's message was more direct. "This is ridiculous, Skylar. You are acting like a spoiled brat. Call me back immediately so we can resolve this like adults." Marcus left 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. In the final one, he was practically begging, "Sky, please, Jennifer is freaking out. If this comes out, her family will call off the wedding. My job could be in jeopardy if they find out about the fraud stuff. You are my sister. Please do not destroy my life over this." The audacity was breathtaking. They had spent years stealing from me, culminating in the theft of my car, and somehow I was the villain for wanting accountability. But their panic told me everything I needed to know about how serious this situation really was. They were not just worried about paying me back. They were terrified of criminal consequences, which meant they knew exactly how illegal their actions had been. I spent the day strengthening my position. Sarah had recommended a criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime, and I had a consultation scheduled for the 27th. I also reached out to my bank to put fraud alerts on all my accounts and started the process of getting new Social Security and account numbers. Most importantly, I called my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister, who had always been the family truth teller. Rebecca lived in California and had a complicated relationship with my parents, but she had always been straight with me. "Skylar, honey, I am so sorry this happened, but I cannot say I am surprised," Rebecca said when I filled her in on everything. "What do you mean?" Rebecca sighed heavily. "Your parents have always lived beyond their means, and Marcus has been their golden child since birth. Do you remember when your grandmother died 5 years ago?" I did remember. Grandma Henderson had left her estate to be split equally between Dad and Rebecca. It was not a fortune, but it had been enough to pay off Dad's credit card debt at the time. "Well, what you do not know is that your father borrowed against his inheritance before your grandmother even passed. He had convinced her to take out a reverse mortgage on her house, and was using that money to cover Marcus's college expenses and his own debts." My stomach dropped. "What happened to Grandma's house lost to foreclosure 6 months after she died? There was no inheritance left for either of us. I let it go because she was already gone and fighting would not bring the money back, but it showed me exactly who your father really was." The pattern was becoming clear. My parents had been financially irresponsible for years, using family relationships to cover their poor decisions. Marcus's expensive tastes had been subsidized by grandparents, relatives, and now me. I had just been too trusting to see it. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something important. If I pursue criminal charges against them, will I have any family support?" "Honey, you will have my complete support. What they did to you is unconscionable. But you should know that they are probably going to try to turn the rest of the family against you. They are very good at playing victim." She was right. By evening, I was getting calls from my cousin David, my uncle Tom, and even my great-aunt Martha, all of whom had apparently been contacted by my parents with their version of events. The story they were spreading was predictable. I was being vindictive and cruel, trying to destroy the family over a simple misunderstanding about a car I was not even using. They painted themselves as loving parents who had made a small mistake, and me as an ungrateful daughter who was threatening to put her own family in prison. But Rebecca had been busy too. She had called several family members with the real story, including the identity fraud attempts. The family was split down the middle, but the people whose opinions I actually respected were firmly in my corner. My cousin Sarah, who is a nurse in Portland, called me directly. "Skylar, I am so proud of you for standing up to them. Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda have been freeloading off family for decades. Someone needed to finally hold them accountable." The support gave me strength, but it also confirmed what I had suspected: this was not an isolated incident. My parents had a history of financial manipulation within the family. On the evening of December 26th, Jennifer showed up at my apartment. She looked terrible, her eyes red-rimmed and her usual perfect composure completely shattered. I almost felt sorry for her until I remembered that she had been perfectly fine with benefiting from stolen money. "Skylar, please, we need to talk," she said when I opened the door. I let her in but did not offer her a seat. "What do you want, Jennifer? I want you to know that I had no idea about the identity fraud stuff. I only knew about the car, and Marcus told me that you had given permission." I studied her face, looking for tells. Jennifer had always been hard to read, but her distress seemed genuine. "Even if that is true, you knew the car was mine when you used the money for your wedding." "I know, and I feel terrible about it. But Skylar, if this comes out, it will destroy everything. My family, Marcus's job, our future together. Is that really worth it over money?" There it was again. The assumption that this was about money rather than trust, respect, and basic human decency. "Jennifer, this is not about the money. This is about the fact that my family has been systematically stealing from me for years and then acting like I am the problem for being upset about it." "But they are your family." "No," I said firmly. "Family does not steal from each other. Family does not forge documents. Family does not commit fraud. What they did makes them criminals who happen to share my DNA." Jennifer started crying then, and I could see her carefully constructed future crumbling in real time. Part of me felt bad for her. She had genuinely fallen for Marcus's charm and had probably believed his lies about my consent. But she had also been happy to benefit from theft, and that made her complicit. "What do you want?" she asked desperately. "What will it take to make this go away?" "Full restitution. $65,000 for the car plus the $10,000 difference between what they sold it for and its actual value." Another $20,000 for the credit damage and monitoring I will need for life. And a written confession of everything they have done, signed and notarized. Jennifer's face went white. $95,000, we do not have that kind of money. Then you should not have stolen it. But the wedding is not my problem. You can have a courthouse wedding like millions of other people do, or you can call it off entirely. I honestly do not care. Jennifer left without another word, and I knew the 27th deadline was going to come and go without any meaningful response from my family. Which was exactly what I was counting on. That night I finalized my documentation, prepared my timeline, and made peace with what was about to happen. Some bridges were not worth saving, especially when the people on the other side had already burned them down. Tomorrow the real consequences would begin. December 27th arrived with radio silence from my family. No calls, no texts, no desperate visits. Their silence told me everything I needed to know about their priorities and their strategy. They were probably hoping I would cool down and let it slide like I always had before. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At 9 a.m. sharp I walked into the Denver Police Department with Sarah Chen and a banker's box full of evidence. The detective assigned to financial crimes, Detective Maria Rodriguez, listened to my story with growing interest and increasing anger on my behalf. "Ma'am, what you are describing is a clear case of identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy," Detective Rodriguez said as she reviewed my documentation. "The forged signature alone is a felony. The attempted mortgage fraud using your identity could result in federal charges." "What happens next?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "We file charges immediately. With this level of documentation, we can get arrest warrants issued today. Since some of the fraud attempts crossed state lines, we will also be referring this to the FBI for federal investigation." My phone started buzzing with frantic calls from my family around 11 a.m. News travels fast in a small community, and apparently someone had seen me walking into the police station. I let every call go to voicemail while Detective Rodriguez processed the paperwork. The first arrest was Dad. They picked him up at his office at the insurance agency where he worked, handcuffing him in front of his colleagues and clients. The second was Mom, arrested at the grocery store in full view of half the neighborhood. Marcus was last pulled over during his lunch break and arrested on the street outside his workplace. Within 6 hours, my entire immediate family was sitting in jail cells, and I was fielding calls from local news stations who had picked up the story from police scanners. The headline practically wrote itself: "Local family arrested for stealing daughter's car to fund wedding." But the real devastation was just beginning. By evening, the story had gone viral on social media. Someone at Marcus's workplace had posted about his arrest on Facebook, complete with photos of him being led away in handcuffs. Jennifer's carefully curated Instagram life exploded as friends and family shared the news. The comments were brutal. "Wait. Isn't this the couple that was asking for donations for their dream wedding on GoFundMe last month? I knew something was fishy when they suddenly had money for the Broadmoor. Makes sense now. Feel so bad for the sister. Imagine your own parents stealing from you." Jennifer called me crying hysterically around 8 p.m. "Skylar, you have to make this stop. My work is asking questions. My parents are flying in from Chicago. The wedding venue is threatening to cancel because of the negative publicity." "I warned you this would happen," I said calmly. "This is what consequences look like. But I gave you the ring back. I told Marcus I could not marry him after finding out what they did. This was news to me. You broke up with him. How could I not? When I found out about the identity fraud, I realized I never really knew him. Who knows what else he has been lying about. My father ran a credit check on Marcus after your police report became public. He has $30,000 in credit card debt that he never told me about. The house of cards was collapsing faster than I had anticipated. Marcus had apparently been lying to Jennifer about his financial situation, just like he had been lying to everyone else. Jennifer, I am sorry you got caught up in this, but these are natural consequences of their actions. I did not create this situation." "I know," she whispered. My whole life is falling apart." After she hung up, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had not wanted to hurt Jennifer specifically, but she had made her choice to benefit from stolen money. Now she was learning the cost of that choice. The next morning brought even more developments. The story had been picked up by a local television station, and reporter Amanda Walsh wanted an on-camera interview. Against Sarah's initial advice, I decided to do it. "I want people to understand that this was not a family dispute over money," I said, looking directly into the camera. This was systematic financial abuse that went on for years. They did not just steal my car. They attempted to steal my identity, my credit, and my financial future. The interview aired that evening and was shared thousands of times online. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with hundreds of people sharing their own stories of financial abuse by family members. But the real bombshell came the next day when Detective Rodriguez called me with an update. "Miss Henderson, you need to know that your case has opened up a much larger investigation. Your father's employer contacted us after his arrest. Apparently there have been irregularities in client accounts at his insurance agency. They are conducting an internal audit, but it looks like your father may have been embezzling from customer premiums for months." My blood ran cold. How much money are we talking about? Potentially over $200,000. If the audit confirms embezzlement, your father could be looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. The scope of their crimes was so much larger than I had imagined. My car was just the tip of an iceberg that included identity fraud, attempted mortgage fraud, and now potentially major embezzlement from his employer. That evening, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It turned out to be Marcus calling from jail. "Sky, you have to help me," he said, his voice broken and desperate. "Dad is talking about taking a plea deal that would implicate me in the embezzlement." I did not know anything about that, I swear. I only knew about the car and the credit applications. "Marcus, you are an adult who made choices. You chose to forge my signature. You chose to attempt fraud. You chose to steal from me. Now you get to live with the consequences." "But I am your brother." "No," I said firmly. "Brothers do not steal from their sisters. Brothers do not commit fraud. Brothers do not destroy trust and then expect forgiveness. You are a criminal who happens to share my DNA, nothing more." I hung up and blocked the number. The preliminary hearings were scheduled for January, but the damage to their lives was already irreversible. Dad had been fired and would likely lose his insurance license permanently. Marcus had been terminated from his job and was facing multiple felony charges. Mom, who had been a respected member of several community organizations, had become a pariah overnight. Their mugshots were permanently available online, linked forever to stories about family theft and fraud. Their reputations were destroyed, their futures shattered, and their relationships in ruins. And it had all started because they thought they could steal from me without consequences. As I sat in my apartment that night looking at the news coverage of their arrest, I felt something I had not expected: peace. For the first time in years, I was not walking on eggshells around my family. I was not wondering what they might take from me next. I was not carrying the weight of their poor decisions and manipulation. They had taught me that blood meant nothing without respect, trust, and love. Now they would learn what life looked like without any of those things. The weeks following the arrests were a masterclass in how quickly a carefully constructed life can completely unravel. I watched from a distance as my family's world collapsed in ways that were both predictable and shocking. Dad's embezzlement case exploded into a full-scale investigation when the insurance agency's audit revealed he had been stealing customer premiums for over 2 years. The scheme was sophisticated. He would collect payments from clients, deposit them into a personal account, then use new client payments to cover the previous theft. Classic Ponzi-style fraud. When Marcus needed money for wedding expenses, Dad had gotten sloppy and started taking larger amounts, which eventually triggered the audit. The financial damage was staggering. Dad had stolen over $300,000 from dozens of clients, many of them elderly people on fixed incomes, who had trusted him with their life savings. The local news interviewed several victims, and their stories were heartbreaking. "Mr. Henderson helped me with my home insurance after my husband died," said 78-year-old Margaret Connolly, tears streaming down her face. "I trusted him with everything. Now I find out he has been stealing my premium payments for months. I do not know how I am going to afford my medications." Watching that interview was the first time I felt genuine remorse about the path I had chosen. Not remorse for holding them accountable, but genuine sadness for the innocent people who had been hurt by my father's greed. These victims were suffering because my family had prioritized Marcus's wedding over basic human decency. Mom's social collapse was almost as dramatic as Dad's legal troubles. She had been active in the Church Ladies Auxiliary, the neighborhood book club, and several charitable organizations. Within a week of her arrest, she had been quietly asked to step down from all her positions. Former friends crossed the street to avoid talking to her. The woman who had always prided herself on her reputation and social standing had become a social pariah overnight. Marcus's situation was perhaps the most pathetic. Jennifer had not just broken up with him. She had moved back to Chicago and taken a restraining order out against him when he started showing up at her apartment drunk and begging for forgiveness. His job termination meant he could not afford his apartment, so he had moved back in with Mom and Dad, creating a household of 3 unemployed criminals feeding off each other's misery. But the consequences kept expanding in ways none of us had anticipated. The insurance agency where Dad had worked faced massive liability claims from the defrauded clients. Their insurance covered some of the losses, but the business reputation was destroyed. The agency ended up closing permanently, putting 12 innocent employees out of work right before Christmas. The ripple effects reached Marcus's former co-workers too. His manager, who had recommended him for promotion just months earlier, faced questions about his judgment and oversight. Several clients had specifically requested to work with Marcus based on his manager's endorsement, and now those relationships were compromised. Even the church where they had been members for over 20 years was affected. Dad had been the treasurer for the building fund, and although no money was missing, the congregation demanded a full audit of all church finances. The pastor, who had known our family since Marcus and I were children, publicly stated that trust once broken required significant effort to rebuild. Jennifer's family, who I learned had been suspicious of Marcus from the beginning, used the scandal as evidence that their daughter should not associate with that kind of people. Her father, a successful business owner in Chicago, apparently said he was grateful the truth had come out before the wedding rather than after. The local newspapers kept the story alive by following up on the broader investigation. It turned out that Dad's scheme had required him to forge several client signatures on insurance documents, making him a serial forger, not just someone who had made a one-time mistake with my car title. 3 weeks after the initial arrests, Detective Rodriguez called with another update that left me speechless. "Miss Henderson, you should know that your case has inspired several other family members to come forward with their own complaints against your parents and brother." "What do you mean?" "Your cousin David filed a report yesterday. Apparently your brother borrowed $5,000 from him last year for a business investment that never existed. Your Uncle Tom also filed a report about a loan to your father that was supposedly for home repairs but was actually used to pay credit card debt." The scope of their deception was staggering. They had not just been stealing from me. They had been systematically defrauding extended family members for years. Everyone had been told different stories about why they needed money, and no one had realized the extent of the lies until my case made headlines. By February, the family WhatsApp group that had once buzzed with holiday photos and birthday wishes had become a crime report discussion thread. Cousin after cousin shared stories of loans that were never repaid, suspicious requests for personal information, and financial manipulations that made sense only in hindsight. Aunt Rebecca flew in from California to attend one of the preliminary hearings, and we met for coffee afterward. She looked exhausted and angry. "Skylar, I owe you an apology," she said. "I knew your father had financial problems, but I had no idea he was stealing from clients and family members. When you called me about the car, I thought it was just more of his poor judgment. I did not realize you were dealing with career criminals. How could you have known? They fooled everyone. But I should have warned you more strongly. After the situation with your grandmother's house, I should have told the whole family what kind of person your father really was. Maybe this could have been prevented." Rebecca's guilt was misplaced, but I understood it. Everyone who had ever trusted my parents was questioning their own judgment, wondering what signs they had missed and whether they could have protected others. The most painful conversation came when Detective Rodriguez informed me that the FBI was now investigating whether Dad's identity theft attempts on me had been practiced for a larger scheme targeting his insurance clients. They suspected he had been using client information to apply for credit cards and loans, using the insurance agency's reputation to add legitimacy to the applications. "If that is confirmed, your father could be looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison," Detective Rodriguez explained. "Identity theft across state lines, wire fraud, racketeering charges. This could be one of the largest family-run fraud operations we have seen in the state." As I sat in my apartment that night processing the magnitude of what my simple car theft report had uncovered, I felt overwhelmed by the scope of destruction. What had started as me demanding justice for a stolen car had exposed a criminal enterprise that had harmed dozens of innocent people over multiple years. But I also felt something I had not expected: relief that it was finally over. The lies, the manipulation, the walking on eggshells, the constant worry about what they might do next. All of that was finished. They would never be able to hurt me again because they would spend the foreseeable future in prison. Justice was not just being served. It was being delivered with interest. 6 months after that devastating Christmas morning, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my father receive a 28-year sentence for racketeering, identity theft, and embezzlement. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. "Mr. Henderson, you have systematically destroyed the financial security of dozens of families while betraying the trust of your own daughter." The sentence reflects not just the monetary damage, but the profound violation of human dignity your actions represent. Mom received 12 years for conspiracy and fraud. Marcus got 8 years for identity theft and forgery. As they were led away in shackles, none of them looked at me. The people who had once been my family were now simply criminals paying for their choices. The civil restitution case had been settled months earlier. The court ordered them to pay me $135,000 covering my car, the fraudulent applications, credit damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. Of course, they had no assets left after the criminal fines and lawyer fees, so I would likely never see that money. But the judgment was public record, a permanent acknowledgement that what they did to me was wrong. More importantly, the insurance agency's bonding company had covered the losses to Dad's victims, and several class action lawsuits were ensuring that the innocent people he had robbed would be made whole. My decision to pursue justice had protected dozens of families from financial ruin. The media attention had died down, but the story's impact continued. I received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Many had never reported their situations because they felt guilty about destroying the family. My case had given them permission to seek justice. Sarah Chen and I had become genuine friends through the process, bonding over our shared experiences with family dysfunction. She introduced me to her family, who welcomed me with the warmth and acceptance I had never felt at home. Her parents, both immigrants who had built a successful restaurant business through honest work, treated me like another daughter. "Family is not just about blood," Sarah's mother Linda told me over dinner one evening. "Family is about love, respect, and choosing to be there for each other. You choose family every day through your actions." That wisdom helped me rebuild my understanding of what family actually meant. I started volunteering with an organization that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial fraud, using my experience to help others recognize warning signs. Through that work, I met James, a computer programmer whose grandfather had been victimized by a scheme similar to my father's. James was quiet, kind, and had the same protective instincts toward his family that I wished I had felt from mine. Our relationship developed slowly, built on the foundation of shared values and genuine trust. 8 months after the sentencings, Aunt Rebecca and I organized the first annual Henderson Family Truth and Reconciliation Gathering. Instead of pretending everything was normal, we invited all the family members who had been victimized by my parents and Marcus to share their stories and support each other. Cousin David talked about how the loan he gave Marcus had been his daughter's college fund. Uncle Tom shared how Dad's borrowing had forced him to delay retirement by 3 years. Even distant relatives came forward with stories of manipulation and financial pressure that made sense only in hindsight. But the gathering was not just about the damage. It was about healing and moving forward. We created new family traditions based on honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. We established a family emergency fund that anyone could access with full disclosure and formal agreements. Most importantly, we committed to never again pretending that blood relationship excuses criminal behavior. "They taught us what family should not look like," Rebecca said during her speech. "Now we get to choose what family actually means." My personal healing took longer than the legal resolution. Therapy helped me understand that my guilt about destroying the family was misplaced. I had not destroyed anything. I had simply stopped enabling destruction that was already happening. The financial impact of their theft had been real. Losing the car had forced me to take on additional debt and delayed my plans to buy a house. The credit monitoring and identity protection services were ongoing expenses I would carry for years. But the emotional damage had been far more significant than the monetary losses. Learning to trust my own judgment again was the hardest part. I had ignored red flags for years because I wanted to believe my family loved me. Now I had to learn to listen to my instincts and set boundaries without feeling guilty about protecting myself. The breakthrough came during a therapy session when my counselor asked me a simple question. "If strangers had done these things to you, how would you have responded?" The answer was obvious. I would have called the police immediately. I would never have tolerated theft, fraud, or financial manipulation from anyone else. The only reason I had endured it from my family was that I had been conditioned to accept abuse as love. That realization freed me to build healthier relationships. James and I got engaged on the 2-year anniversary of my police report, and I felt genuinely excited about creating a family based on choice rather than obligation. Sarah's family would be my wedding party. Rebecca would walk me down the aisle. The people who had shown up for me during my darkest time would celebrate my happiest moments. The house I eventually bought was smaller than what I had originally planned, but it was mine, purchased with money I had earned through honest work. James and I painted the living room together, hung pictures that made us smile, and created a space filled with love and trust. On Christmas morning, 3 years after the day that changed everything, I woke up in my own home with my chosen family around me. Sarah's parents had brought homemade dumplings. Rebecca was teaching James her grandmother's biscuit recipe. Children from our extended chosen family played in the living room, surrounded by adults who protected rather than exploited them. As I watched the people I truly loved enjoying breakfast together, I realized that my parents had given me an unexpected gift. By showing me what family should never look like, they had freed me to create something better. Their betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been illuminating. I learned that I was stronger than I knew, braver than I believed, and worthy of genuine love and respect. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that could have happened, because it forces you to stop settling for less than you deserve. The people who truly loved me had proven it through their actions, not their words. The people who only claimed to love me had shown their true nature when tested. Now I knew the difference, and I would never settle for anything less than authentic, honest, protective love again. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you experienced justice being served to people who thought they were untouchable? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because these stories remind us that we all deserve relationships built on respect rather than exploitation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of standing up for yourself when it matters most. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that blood relation does not excuse criminal behavior, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is hold the people you love accountable for their actions. Thank you for listening to my journey from victim to survivor to someone who understands that true family is chosen through daily acts of love and respect, not accidents of genetics. Remember, you are worthy of relationships that build you up rather than tear you down, and sometimes, walking away from toxic family members is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and the innocent people they might hurt next.